Hi everybody, I'm John Young. I'm a lawyer at Kingsley Napley as part of our M&A group. I'm here today to discuss the difference between completion accounts and lockbox mechanisms when working out how much will be paid for a company with James Wood, who's a senior manager in the transaction services team at Buzzacott. He regularly advises on which is the best of these for any given transaction. James, maybe you can start by explaining what the point of these mechanisms is.
Thanks, John. The purpose of a completion mechanism is to determine the adjustments made to an enterprise value to reach the equity value for a business. The equity value represents the final consideration payable by a buyer, so it's really important to understand the difference between these two terms.
Okay, and so what is the enterprise value of the business and how does it differ from the equity value?
Put very simply, the enterprise value is the value of the underlying trade of the business, whereas the equity value takes into account the working capital and the net debt of a business. Net debt is the sum of all cash and cash-like items less the debt of the business. Most transactions we see are performed on a cash-free, debt-free basis with an adjustment for a normal level of working capital.
Okay, and how does that feed into completion accounts versus lockbox and the differences between those mechanisms?
Yeah, so as you say, the two most widely accepted completion mechanisms are the completion accounts and lockbox. The aim of these mechanisms is to ensure that business is sold with sufficient resources and working capital to ensure that post-close, the business can continue as a going concern. They basically act as protections for buyers to prevent sellers from extracting excess resources from the business in the lead up to completion.
Okay, so what are completion accounts and how do they work?
So for completion accounts, the final adjustments to the equity value are based on the actual balance sheet on the date of completion. This means that post-close, a set of accounts are created up to the date of completion, focusing mainly on that balance sheet. From these accounts, the purchase price is adjusted upwards or downwards based on the changes in the working capital and the position of net debt. On the date of signing, it's usual practice to use an estimated balance sheet and to make the necessary adjustments to the consideration once the completion accounts are agreed.
Okay, and then I guess from our perspective as the lawyers, it's going to be important for us to make sure that we work with your team to set out the correct accounting policies to make sure that an agreed and understood result produces from the completion accounts, and to make sure that those accounting policies are consistent with those used in previous years' accounts, except where there's an agreed change because of something in the transaction. So that's a really great explanation of completion accounts, James. How do lockboxes differ from completion accounts?
Sure. So with a lockbox mechanism, the final equity value is set prior to completion using an agreed balance sheet at a set date. Effectively, this locks in the purchase price of the business at that lockbox date, giving both buyer and seller confirmation of the main parts of consideration to be paid. However, there are two further moving parts that are considered post-lockbox date, which are the value accrual and leakage.
Okay, so what's the value accrual?
So the value accrual represents the amounts paid to the seller for running the business between the lockbox date and completion. There are multiple ways of calculating this figure, but it's normally based off the expected cash profits of the business during the period between the lockbox date and actual completion.
Okay, and what's leakage? Why is that important in the transaction?
So leakage is a further protection given to a buyer. So leakage is where a seller extracts cash outside the normal terms outside the normal course of business, such as declaring an additional dividend or just taking cash out in various other management charges. This leakage mechanism reduces the level of consideration that purchaser will pay to a seller if they've effectively already taken that part of their consideration early.
That's great, and I think you've prepared a short summary for us of some of the pros and cons of these two mechanisms and where you might use them, which we've linked to in the description to this video. James, thank you so much. That's been a really great short summary. Obviously, with these things, the devil's always in the detail, and it will be very important that the buyers and the sellers work with both the corporate finance advisors and the lawyers to make sure that these mechanisms are doing what they're supposed to do. So if you're thinking about selling your business or buying one, please don't hesitate to get in touch with James or us, because we'd be delighted to help you. James, thanks again for making the time to talk to me today.
John, absolute pleasure. Yeah, as you say, really simplified a lot of those key points. So it's really important to get the experienced advisors in place to make sure that you're well protected when you go into these sorts of transactions.
Thanks again, and we hope that the viewers will join us for future videos.